Thank you everyone for coming. This is the second part of our ADHD webinar series with Liss. Hopefully you managed to catch the first one, but if you didn't, we do have a recording available, so we can share that with you afterwards. Just let us know. Ben is in the chat, so Ben can answer any kind of questions. Maybe if there is a link to the previous webinar, Ben, we could probably drop that in. But yeah, we'll see. But thank you all for coming. We'll get started today. So, like I said, this is the second part of our two-parter series on ADHD with Liss. Liss herself is going to be sort of our keynote speaker, if you will, and is going to be sharing sort of the reality of being diagnosed with ADHD as an adult, what that means for students at university, and the steps that we can all take to sort of improve in the understanding of ADHD in adults. And yeah, I suppose pass over to you, Liss, to introduce yourself.
Yeah, no problem. So, hi everyone, I'm Liss, and I am kind of just a bit of a chaos goblin across the HE sector. I do a bit of lecturing, a bit of speaking, a bit of consultancy in terms of neuro-inclusivity. I specialize in ADHD and autism, particularly in late diagnosed people. And I am also a postgraduate student, so a little bit of everything. Um, and hopefully this is going to be a good one.
I'm sure it will be. We had really good feedback on the first one, and I know there was a lot of people looking forward to this side of sort of this I suppose this section of it really. So in today's webinar, we're going to obviously hear from Liss as she shares some of her lived experiences as somebody who was diagnosed with ADHD during her undergraduate degree, and then dive into some present pal, how it can support with ADHD, and other learning differences. And also, we might have a sneak preview at our new feature that's coming out as well, which I'll hold on to for later. But I'll pass you this, and yeah, I'll be here for any questions as well, guys.
No problem. So obviously we're going to be talking a bit about late diagnosis today. I'm just going to kind of define what I mean by late diagnosis. Really, here we're talking about adulthood diagnosis, so anytime past the age of 18. Some people are diagnosed as soon as they go at university. Other people more recently have been getting diagnosed up into their 40s and 50s and 60s. And it's all kind of to do with the way ADHD is diagnosed. So, starting off a little bit with my experience, it wasn't a case of I just saw the traits of ADHD one day and thought, that sounds like me. I think I'll get a diagnosis. It was something I constantly thought about every day as a child. I always knew something was different. I always thought I was from another planet. And it was obvious to other children as well. I was first asked if I was autistic when I was 11 by another child while we were playing rounders at Scouts. My response was, I don't know, maybe a little bit. I now know that you can't be a bit autistic. You either are or you aren't. And it turned out that I was ADHD autistic. So I watched a YouTube video on the channel How to ADHD on YouTube when I was 19. And that's when it felt like something was kind of starting to describe why I was different. Um, and following that, during that sort of same year, all of my lecturers at uni got together and had a nice little chat about me without me, about how I was too passionate or overly passionate, I think is the term they used. In lectures, I would interrupt a lot. I'd always try to get my thoughts in there. And that prompted me to go to the university disability advisor. I was then diagnosed with dyspraxia and advised to ask my GP for a referral for an assessment of ADHD. It wasn't then until about 4 years later, when I was studying my PGCE, my teacher training year, where I was diagnosed with ADHD and then as autistic a year after that. So I've been collecting them a little bit, but now I kind of feel like both of those diagnoses describe everything that's been going on, and it's been a really great experience since then. Can I have the next slide, please, Joe? Thank you. So why does late diagnosis happen? A lot of the time, late diagnosis happens, particularly in women, non binary people, people of colour. It does affect minorities more. And that's because a lot of the research we have on ADHD was done on young white boys. They were kind of the sample that all the researchers back in the day actually studied to kind of figure out what ADHD was. And in women in particular, traits are often mislabeled as things like depression, anxiety, OCD, sometimes even personality disorders. I was actually diagnosed with depression, anxiety, and OCD all before getting an ADHD diagnosis. And while I did have those conditions, they were as a result of my ADHD not being supported more so than just like a primary concern. They were a bit of a secondary diagnosis. In women as well, in particular, traits are less likely to be observable. We talked about this a bit in the last webinar. Our traits can be a lot more internal. We're less likely to be visibly hyperactive, and therefore we're less likely to be an inconvenience to others, basically. Um, for all I struggled a lot as a child, I was not an inconvenience to my teachers, therefore didn't get a diagnosis. Can I have the next slide, please? So adulthood diagnosis, adults have only actually been eligible for an ADHD diagnosis in the UK at least since 2008. Now I was 10 at the time, so I could well have had a diagnosis had that been spotted. And in terms of thinking about people who may have another diagnosis, but their ADHD has been noticed later. A co-occurring diagnosis for autism and ADHD has only been possible since 2013, so you could only be diagnosed with both since then. And that's made it very difficult for even with people who do have another diagnosis to get an ADHD diagnosis. The word diagnosis is becoming a little bit repetitive here. And research does continue to use phrases like severe childhood disorder, which kind of puts into people's head that it is a childhood thing. It diminishes adults' experiences. A lot of people who are getting late diagnosed, a lot of people are kind of blaming on the rise of TikTok, which I think is really unfair because TikTok is an ADHD trap. It's kind of designed in a way that it sucks uh, people with ADHD in, and that's how they're finding out about it. Um, uh, that's a whole rabbit hole. And a lot of people have the assumption that adults grow out of ADHD. Every adult I know with ADHD pretty much says the opposite. They say it got worse, and support is less common for adults with ADHD as well. I personally have found that my ADHD has been more difficult to manage without sort of the strict schedules of school and parents being parents having consequences if you didn't do certain things. Can I have the next slide, please? So in terms of late diagnosis, there can be a certain amount of challenges and feelings that are common both before and during and after the diagnostic process. So, in terms of before the diagnosis, you are like constantly looking for why you're different. It's not a case of, like I say, you stumble across the term ADHD, look at the criteria, and think, I fit that, I'm off to the GP. You are kind of constantly asking yourself, why am I so lazy? Why can I not get things done like other people can't? Why can't I shut up and just mind my own business? All these sorts of things that are not true about ADHD. These are the things we tell ourselves because we don't understand why we're that way. And that can lead to a lot of self esteem issues. But kind of during and after the diagnosis process, there's a lot of feelings which I've listed on the slide here. One of them is grief. And I mean that in the sense of, not in the sense of like, oh, I wish I didn't have ADHD. I wish I didn't have this condition that I had to manage. It's more of a case of what could I have done if I had known about this? What strategies could I have implemented? Similarly, a lot of imposter syndrome can come during a diagnosis. I constantly convinced myself I was faking during my assessment, that I just managed to convince the psychiatrist I have ADHD, which is absolutely bonkers because these people train on brains for years. They know what ADHD looks like. Overwhelm was another big one. It's almost like you're having to learn about a new operating system from scratch. A metaphor I always like to make is like, if you've been asked to bake a cake, maybe that cake is your degree, and you've been told to put all the ingredients together, put it in the oven and bake it for 20 minutes. Getting a late diagnosis is almost like figuring out that your brain was never an oven to begin with. It was a microwave, so you need to adapt the recipe. It doesn't mean you can't make a delicious cake, but you do need to learn all these new strategies. The way you've been told the human brain sort of works doesn't necessarily apply to you as much. You have to wade through all of marketing towards people with ADHD that can be quite predatory, and especially nowadays. And it's quite difficult to kind of get into a place where you do understand your neurotype and can manage it more easily. Confusion as well was a big one for me. So for me, my ADHD traits seem more obvious now than before. That's because I was masking them before, so I would hide them. Because I thought everyone else was masking at all times, when I couldn't pay attention during a maths lesson, I didn't think, oh, everyone else is managing to pay attention. I thought everyone else is managing to look like they're paying attention. And I thought the trick was, if you look like you're paying attention, you must be paying attention. And I kind of thought that everyone else's brain worked in the exact same way as mine. And then I also had a lot of frustration. How did no one notice I had ADHD earlier? What if I had acted up at school? Would that have got me help more quickly? And all of these feelings are kind of mixing around at once. And that can be a lot to go through, particularly during university when you've got enough to think about as it is. Can I have the next slide, please? Great, thank you. And in terms of the effects of being undiagnosed or late diagnosed, it is a massive issue. It's not just a case of you don't necessarily get medication or you don't necessarily get support. It's not a case of it just affects you a tiny bit. This is a massive issue. Undiagnosed ADHD can lead to things like job instability. Before I got diagnosed, I never held down a job for more than 6 months. Now I hold down 10 jobs at once, which is nice, and have been doing so for more than a year. You're a lot more likely to develop a substance use disorder. People with undiagnosed, untreated ADHD are much more likely to be alcoholics or use illegal substances. And I've had that experience with alcohol personally as well. You're also more likely to develop secondary mental health conditions. As I discussed earlier, women are a lot more likely to be diagnosed with depression or anxiety or OCD prior to an ADHD diagnosis, and you're more likely to develop these without kind of that understanding of yourself. You're more likely to have suicidal thoughts, less likely to complete university because you don't have the right support, and a lot of the kind of guidance given to students at university is written in a way for neurotypical students, which is really difficult. Um, you're more likely to have financial difficulty, and there is also an increased risk of criminal behaviour. So it is a massive deal, undiagnosed ADHD, and the severity of this list of things can maybe show you what people might be going through when they do receive that late diagnosis, all the answers they might be getting to all these different issues. And it's a lot more than just, I can't sit still and I can't pay attention. Can I have the next slide, please? So, in terms of how we can help, and I've kind of focused this a little bit more directly onto the university environment, but it can apply in a workplace environment as well, or any other environment. One of the biggest things is embracing neurodiversity. Not everyone who maybe needs a diagnosis is able to get it. I was on the waiting list for 4 years. Other people are on it for a lot longer. York, where I initially got my diagnosis, have actually shut off their waiting lists now. So there's so many people who can't even be on a waiting list at all. So it's really important that even if someone doesn't have a diagnosis yet, that their needs are taken seriously. It shouldn't be a condition of you need to have this diagnosis in order to be understood. Trying to avoid buts as well. This is a little bit of maybe a difficult one to explain, but something that can be really frustrating for people when they are kind of trying to accept their diagnosis or their neurotype is, but your ADHD makes you so creative. Yes, there is a lot of benefits to ADHD. A lot of us are a lot more sort of resilient. A lot of us are very quick thinkers. We're great in an emergency. We're great at working under pressure. We are very creative. However, kind of focusing on that during a process where people are trying to find ways of working that suits them can be really difficult because um, they kind of are learning to human from scratch with the correct instructions, is the best way I can describe that. Also, strategies aren't a one size fits all. I'm always asked, what sort of strategies would you suggest for a student with ADHD? And it's difficult to kind of give a blanket answer without it being a very specific situation. But for me, when we're trying to find strategies, it's always good to remember the acronym NICE. These are the things that will engage an ADHD brain. So N is for novelty. So if something's really new, something's really exciting because it's the first time they're doing it, maybe like a new year at university, a new course, a new module, that sort of thing. I is for interesting, so something that kind of engages our brains because it's interesting. C is for compulsory. So, for example, I had to come to this webinar at this time because there was a contract saying so. It was compulsory. If I didn't do it at that time, then there was no other chance to do it. And E is for emergency. So that can be things like a deadline. And whenever you're trying to kind of figure out a strategy with a student with ADHD, coming back to how you can engage one of these four things is always the best way forward as a starting point. And lastly, I've just got a little shameless plug in there at the end. I'm currently writing a guidebook to university called the Positive Procrastination Project for students with ADHD, about sort of how DSA can help them and working through discovering your neurotype. So that should be coming out next year. And I want to make it as helpful as possible for people working in DSA as well. So hopefully that will have some strategies in, just for something to look out for. And I believe that's my final slide, so it might be questions next if we can. Yep, I guessed
We've got some
correctly.
questions. I think one's already just come through, but I think it's thank you for sharing that. I think it's really interesting to see the what can happen if you don't get a diagnosis. So like there's so much insight there of things that I wasn't even aware of. Like say increasing potential substance abuse
Mm.
or sort of jobs insecurity and things like that. I think yeah, really interesting to get an insight into all of that because it's things that I'm myself and I'm presuming some people in the chat weren't really aware of. And Andrew's asked, sorry, have you ever come across any conflicts between your autism and ADHD?
Oh, yes, a lot of them. So I like to kind of describe autism and ADHD like cousins who or brother and sister who are kind of forced to get along. But there are a lot of conflicts in terms of, I'll use routine as an example. As an autistic person, I really need a lot of routine, whereas as an ADHD, I crave chaos. And it's quite difficult to find a balance between needing that routine and also needing novelty and needing interesting things and needing to kind of just mix it up a little bit. It's something I work on a lot with my clients because it is difficult to find the balance and keeping both of those happy. And to me, in some ways, both need to be looked into and both need to be considered. It's almost like I almost kind of treat it like if my autism is a child and my ADHD is a child and they're sharing a bedroom and I need to parent them both into getting along. That's kind of how I approach that. But I could do like a whole 45-minute webinar on that alone. And I did last week. So it's a massive topic, definitely.
Yeah, there's lots of people sort of sharing their experiences being diagnosed at 44, having their daughter just be diagnosed. Is it they realise they probably have it too? Is it worth getting a diagnosis at my age? Ginny asks. And
Oh,
lots of love for the
absolutely.
cake baking analogy as well.
Love that. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's never too late to get a diagnosis, but even if there are barriers to diagnosis, even just learning about it and kind of um, figuring out how you can use that information to better your life can always be a benefit. I thought I was too old at like 23. So, which is ridiculous, obviously, but it can always help you. It's never too late to turn your life around. I always like to kind of think about it. This is maybe oversimplifying it a bit, but I always kind of think it's never too late to rearrange furniture. I don't kind of get to a certain age and think I'm not going to rearrange my furniture in my house because it's too late. I've made that decision. That's maybe something that's a bit too simplified, but there's always changes you can make to your life to kind of help yourself, and a diagnosis is a great way to go, but self-diagnosis is always valid as well. Um, Again, that's another 45-minute webinar in itself, but uh, diagnosis is difficult to obtain at the moment, and even just self-identifying and recognizing that you may be neurodivergent can be really valuable.
Oh, no, amazing, thank you. I know we've got a flood of questions coming up. We will move on in a moment, but I've noticed one. Is there any research that you would recommend reading in particular? So, Dr. Berkeley, for example, but apparently they may be a bit outdated now. Is there anything that you've found that's been?
Um, Dr. Berkeley has some good ideas. I wouldn't say he's necessarily outdated. He is quite medicalized, though, and I think for his time he needed to be. That's what we needed. For those of you who don't know, he's kind of one of the pioneering ADHD researchers. I would say look into participatory research, so research that has used people with ADHD or neurodivergent people as participants, because you're always going to get personal insight. That's always where I look straight away. I wouldn't say any particular papers jump out because, to be honest, when I'm looking for research, it's always on a very, very specific niche, which I am particularly researching. But I always think just starting with participatory research is the best way to go.
Perfect. And on the sort of thread of resources, somebody said, are there any good resources you could recommend to students who are considering seeking a diagnosis or struggling to get tasks done? So I know you mentioned a YouTube video. Um, is there any more potentially?
Yes, so I think that there is a lot of great YouTube channels. Honestly, when I was first kind of discovering my diagnosis, I saw a lot of infographics on Instagram and that sort of thing, which were really helpful. I find the Instagram page Neurodivers to be quite useful. It's like neurodiverse, but without an E. So it's Neurodivers. And she shares some really great sort of evidence-based tips and that sort of thing. But yeah, even just looking into stuff from other neurodivergent creators and advocates is a great way to go because you find community with that as well as strategies.
Yeah, I mean, we have a community ourselves called This Student Needs on TikTok, where we work with a load of sort of neurodivergent students who come on, share their lived experiences and things, how they get on with the DSA, different experiences, not just with their neurodiversity, but with the DSA itself as well. I believe Ben's put it in the chat, so if anybody wanted to recommend that to a student, then that would be something that'd be cool to look at as well. Lots of sort of lived experience in there. I'm going to jump on and move on now, guys. If there are any more questions, please feel free to sort of throw them into the box. What we can do is maybe stay a little bit later for those who do want their questions answered.
That's
But what
fine.
I'll do now is just jump into a bit on Present Pal and how it can support students with ADHD potentially, but also dive into that hint that I mentioned earlier. So we have a brand new feature being released fairly soon. I believe it might be next week. And it's going to be the live editor. So it's for those who have seen the PowerPoint add-in before, the live editor is going to really be, I suppose, an extended version of that. We had some feedback from students around the add-in. We were going in and upgrading those, and while we were there, we decided to do a pretty complete overhaul, really. So live editor, sorry, allows you to create your notes side by side with your PowerPoint add-in, just as you would previously, but it makes it much more seamless now. So you have the ability to see all of your notes in the add-in or in the phone live, which will sort of completely transform the way that you can actually connect with your audience. We've got a brand new look, so we've updated the user interface for those who have seen it before. It was a little bit more plain. What we've done is make the ability to sort of create your flashcards much easier, but even the ability to add your visual settings into the add-in now as well. So your dark modes, your color backgrounds and things like that, you can get all within the brand new live editor. It also allows you to create, like I mentioned, and edit your flashcards on the go, and you can watch as they automatically sync. So previously you would have had to go in, do a full refresh just to see them on the other device. Let's say I was creating on my phone on the bus when I got home, I would have to refresh on the add-in when I got back, or I don't need to do that now. If I'm creating on one, I'm in the library, I've got my phone and my laptop there. I can create alongside both, and both will be updated live, so that if you do need to quickly run to the shop for an energy drink because you've been in there for 14 hours and you need a bit of energy, you've still got all of your notes on there that you can continue to edit as you're going through. So it gives you the freedom really to work anywhere and at whatever time best suits you. And finally, the biggest, or one of the biggest updates is the ability to sort of control your PowerPoint slides using your smartphone. Now, to those who are aware of PresentPal, this won't be a new feature for you, but what you may have noticed is that we've removed the slight delay between changing flashcard and slide, meaning that you can navigate through your whole presentation with sort of lightning speed, really reducing that anxiety of has it changed, has it not changed, and really sort of ensuring that your audience stays as engaged as possible. So, like I say, this is going to be released real soon. I am actually out of office for the next week or so. I'm getting married on Friday, so you can't book in with me just yet. But what you can do is scan that QR code. It'll take you straight to my diary, and we can get in and show you some more about Live Editor when I'm back in. So yeah, lots of congratulations coming through. Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate that. Yeah, off tomorrow, and then well, yeah, married on Friday. So what we will do is put some time in together to go over everything to do with sort of Live Editor, if you do want to see more on that. Everyone who's attended today has also got the cost voucher that they can sort of get for being in attendance, and we also have our giveaway to run as well. So what I'll do following up is send over your CPD form, which will allow you to auto-generate your CPD. You can request a license. You can request the recording of the webinar if you'd like, but you can also jump into our giveaway as well. Oh, thank you for all the congratulations, guys. I really appreciate that. What I'll do is sort of say thank you everyone for coming now. Liss, is there anything you'd like to add, plug, share with anyone?
No, I just wanted to say that if anyone does have any questions, I am always happy to answer emails, and I'll pop my email in the chat right now because I forgot to put it on a slide. But yeah, if anyone ever has any questions, feel free to shot those over. I'm also going on annual leave shortly because it's my wedding anniversary in a couple of weeks. So it might take me a little bit to get back to you, but I will, I promise. I'm just slow.
Perfect. Well, what I'll do is, like I say thank you to everyone for coming. Really appreciate all of your support, all of your questions, and getting involved in the chat. If there are any extra questions that people would like to ask, then feel free to shoot those in. We'll try and answer as many as we can.